Now let's talk about jihad. Jihad and peace. Jihad or peace. Now, what is jihad? The word jihad linguistically comes from the root of the word jahada, which is the root from which the word jihad is extracted in the Arabic language. And it means doing extra effort. So we can say that the word jihad in the Arabic language means striving and struggling. Idiomatically, the word jihad has three main meanings. The first one is spiritual jihad, which means a non-violent struggling within oneself to live a life of virtue. You struggle against your ego to be a better person. To wake up at 4:30 in the morning and wash your face, hands and feet while people are in their cozy beds and go to pray, that's not easy. This needs spiritual jihad. To spend in charity without showing off, that's not easy. People like to be praised. To do it with sincerity, this is spiritual jihad. I can tell you that the people in Medina realized who is the one who was bringing the food and the money to their doors every single day under the darkness of the night, only when he died, because the food and the provisions ceased to come. And that was Imam Ali Zain al-Abidin, the great-grandson of Prophet Muhammad, because he used to do so without even the poor themselves knowing who is bringing their money to their doors. That's not easy, because you may deal with the same people whom you are feeding, and they don't even show you respect, because they don't know that you're the one who's doing this. That's not easy. This needs spiritual jihad. To do something with sincerity, for the sake of Allah, for the sake of God. You don't want anything in this life from anyone, not even respect. The second type of jihad is verbal jihad. To say the truth, even if it's against your own interest. In some countries, when people say the truth, they can end up in jail or even lose their head. Like Egypt, until 2 years ago. Until 2 years ago. Actually, January 25th revolution, the Tahrir revolution in Egypt, is a form of verbal jihad. On that day, I wrote on my Facebook a fatwa, and I said, Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, said, if the time comes that you see my nation afraid of telling a tyrant that he is a tyrant, then there is no hope for them. That's a hadith of Prophet Muhammad, a saying of Prophet Muhammad. What do tyrants do? Tyrants kill. And he said, if you are afraid of them, there's no hope for you. Which means what? We will all die one day. Die with dignity. Instead of getting ran over by a car, die with dignity. He also said, the best of martyrs is he who was killed by a tyrant for criticizing his tyranny. And the fatwa was, it's not allowed for any man to stay at home on the 28th of January in the Jum'at al-Ghadab, in the Friday of anger. Every man should go out, and for women it's an extra good deed. I can't obligate to women, but I recommend that women also go. And women went before men. Actually, the girls, the female volunteers of Bridges Foundation taught us in this revolution, taught us lessons of manhood. Really. They were amazing. We held a workshop in Bridges about how to attend a protest and what to bring with you and what not, and how to use the coke and how to use this and that to avoid the tear gas and the itching and whatever. And it was given by one of our female volunteers who participated in the protest of the 25th, the first day. The third type of jihad is combative jihad. Combat to establish justice, which is a supreme goal, not only in Islamic teachings, but in every civilization. If you lose your land, if your country is occupied, fight to regain back your land. As simple as that. When the French resistance resisted, no one called them terrorists. They were called la résistance. See how beautiful, très chic. Très chic. Yeah. But the problem is the cut and paste game which is always played against Muslims. They say, look, Muslims are crazy people and they have crazy things in their book. They have combat in the cause of Allah. They should have love in the cause of Allah like others. But read the verse. The verse says, combat in the cause of Allah those who combat against you. And do not transgress limits, for Allah loves not transgressors, which means that even when you combat and you go to the battlefield, you have your combat limits. What are those limits? Stated clearly in the combat order of Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him. Number one is never kill innocent people. I told you, I studied Sharia. We have 90 main rulings in Sharia. One of them is this: لا يقاتل إلا المقاتل. No one can be fought except a combatant. Period. So what happened on 9/11 cannot be justified in Islam, definitely. What happened on 7/7 in London cannot be justified in Islam too. What happened in Hiroshima and Nagasaki cannot be justified in Islam too. Bombing 67 cities in Germany during World War II cannot be justified in Islam too. Bombing London during World War II cannot be justified in Islam too. Innocent civilians are innocent civilians. They should not be a target in wars. These are the teachings of Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him. That's it. No one should try to target innocent civilians to push his political agenda. Fight each other away from innocent civilians. That's it. So that was the first order, combat order of Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him. Okay? The second is never torture prisoners of war. Well, if Muslims are allowed to go to the battlefield, then definitely they are allowed to take captives. When Muslims take captives, they shouldn't torture them. It's not allowed to torture captives of war, neither physically nor psychologically in Islam. Neither physically nor psychologically. By the way, I like questions at the end of my presentation, except one question. You can interrupt me with it at any time, which is, what's your evidence? Prove it. You're not here to waste your time with me. You're not here to let anyone play with your minds. If I don't have an evidence, leave me. Go out. Don't listen to anyone if he tries to play with your mind. Yes, Muslims are not allowed to torture prisoners of war, neither physically nor psychologically. Physically. I'll give you an example. At the time of Prophet Muhammad, in the first battle, which is called Badr, it was the first battle against the enemy, and the Muslims were very desperate for any information about the army of the enemy. So the night before the battle, a group of 3 companions caught 2 soldiers from the army of the enemy who were trying to bring some water. And they took them to the camp of Muslims and they started beating them up to get information from them about the army. The Prophet was praying and he was troubled by what they did, and he ended his prayer and he said, stop it. You beat them up and they are telling you nothing but lies. Come here, both of you. You will be sent home if you answer this question. How many camels do you slaughter every day? The guys are patriotic. They don't want to answer questions about the army, but when they found that, is this the question? How many camels do we slaughter every day? They said some days 9 camels, some days 10 camels. They thought it's a very silly question. The Prophet looked at the companions and he said, the crowd is between 900 and 1,000 because every camel feeds about 100. Go. And this is how an investigator should be. But it is known today by all police forces all over the world that the information that you extract from people after torture is not reliable, because people usually lie to end the torture. They can even say or confess things that they didn't do just to stop the torture. They tell you nothing but lies when you torture them. Not psychologically even. How? After one of the battles called Al-Ahzab, called Banu Qurayza, he was, one of the companions was walking some prisoners of war from a place where they saw their dead before their burial. So they broke down and cried. The Prophet blamed him. He said, don't you have mercy in your heart, Bilal? Why did you take this route? Why didn't you take a different route from which they cannot see their dead? So according to Islam, torturing the prisoner by any means is not allowed. How did the Prophet torture his prisoners? There's a prophetic way of torturing prisoners, by the way. He used to lock them up in the mosque. The mosque was the jail of the prisoners, by the way. So they see the Muslims coming to pray 5 times every day. And the Muslims coming, everyone brings them from his house some drinks and some sweets, milk and dates. And those who were tortured like that were never seen in any battle after that against Muslims. One of them is called Thumama ibn Athal. He said, I came to fight those kind of people who come to pray 5 times a day. They bring me food and drink. This is the prophetic way of torturing prisoners. The Quran says about prisoners of war, to those who want to be qualified for going to paradise, they have to, it says, وَيُطْعِمُونَ الطَّعَامَ عَلَى حُبِّهِ مِسْكِينًا وَيَتِيمًا وَأَسِيرًا. They should feed out of their love to Allah the orphan, the needy, and the POW, the prisoner of war. The prisoner of war is someone who came yesterday to kill me and rape my wife and children and take my land. How come you tell me to feed him? This needs spiritual jihad. Yes, now he's vulnerable. Now he's weak. Now he's in chains. You have to show kindness to him. So in Islam, torturing prisoners of war is not allowed. Never keep animals. Never destroy crops. When I saw this tradition of Prophet Muhammad, I said, no, come on, this is overdoing. Never disturb birds in their nests. And I said, what does he mean? And I didn't understand it until I read about the First Crusade. The First Crusade, the Crusaders did not come by sea. They came through Europe. And you should read what the First Crusaders, they were 1 million men, mainly from Spain, France, and Italy. You should read what they did in Christian countries through Europe, going towards Jerusalem. They looted, plundered, raped, and they put cities on fire. And when I read this, I understood what the Prophet means. You are going to establish justice, so you should be a disciplined crowd, a disciplined army. You should not loot or plunder or rape or do anything like that. He said, don't even disturb birds in their nests. And I understood it. Never destroy infrastructures. Of course, the Prophet didn't say infrastructures, but it is one of his orders not to poison the wells. And poisoning a well is a destruction for the infrastructure of the country. And he said, never mutilate bodies of enemies, dead or alive. In Islam, people who are caught or even dead should not be mutilated. After one of the battles, Umar, a companion of Prophet Muhammad, came to him and said, "O Prophet of Allah, I have good news." He said, "What?" He said, "Guess who is among the captives?" He said, "Who?" Umar said, Suhail ibn Amr. The Prophet said, then what? He said, Suhail ibn Amr, O Prophet of Allah, he's the biggest propagandist, the one who speaks a lot against us, encouraging tribes to go and fight us. Now he's in our hands. Let's get rid of him. The Prophet said, I don't kill prisoners of war. He said, I know that, but that's not any prisoner. We should not waste this chance. The Prophet said, no, Umar, I'm not killing him. He said, okay, Prophet of Allah, I have an idea. And if you listen to the idea of Umar, he said, we'll not do anything to him except one thing. We will break his 2 incisors, those 2 teeth, only. So when he speaks funny. He would say, Islam Muslim, and then people won't listen to him and laugh at him. That's all. And the Prophet said, no, Umar, I'm not going to mutilate a body, or Allah will mutilate my body, even if I'm a prophet. Houses of worship, women, children, and elderly should be all protected from any harm. Actually, houses of worship, according to the Quran, are one of the reasons why Muslims can go to jihad, to protect houses of worship of other religions that we differ with. There's a verse in the Quran that says, had not Allah make it possible that some people fight other people, many monasteries, churches, synagogues, and mosques where the name of Allah is commemorated a lot could have been demolished, which means that Muslims should go out and fight to protect churches and monasteries and synagogues as well as mosques. And always bury the dead with respect, which means that if the enemy fled the battlefield, leaving their dead behind them, it is the duty of the Muslim army to bury the dead of the enemy. And that was 1400 years before the Geneva Convention. I challenge you. Go to www.un.org, download the Geneva Convention. If you find anything more than this, I'll give each one of you 100 euros. By the way, this is a poster in the lobby of the headquarters of the Red Cross in Geneva. And in the bottom it says, the speech of Abu Bakr as-Siddiq to the army of Usama ibn Zayd. Abu Bakr as-Siddiq is the closest companion of Prophet Muhammad and the first successor. That was his speech to the army. What is the intention in jihad? Why do people go to jihad? Why do people go to war? To kill their enemy. But jihad, no, they have a different intention. This is a very key verse in jihad. It says, so if they withdraw from you and fight not against you and offer you peace, then Allah has opened no way for you against them. Which means that if your enemy offers peace, you don't have any other option but accepting peace. Which means that Islam is a religion of justice. Justice should be reached and established through peaceful means. If Muslims fail to establish justice through peaceful means, then they can fight. Again, the verse says, so if they withdraw from you and fight not against you, then Allah has opened no way for you against them. Okay, what is the relationship between jihad and the faith of the enemy? Do Muslims fight people because they are non-Muslims? No. Can Muslims fight Muslims? Of course. When they are oppressors. The verse says, and if 2 groups among the believers fall to fighting each other, then reconcile between them both. But if one of them still rebels against the other, then fight you all against the one that which rebels. So here the verse tells Muslims to fight, all of them united against a group of Muslims, because they are oppressors. So it's not about who's Muslim and who's not. It's about who's an oppressor and who's not. And the Quran is crystal clear on this. it an obligation to fight for your rights? I studied Christianity, by the way. I'm a graduate of a Catholic school, 12 years in a Catholic school. So, some of my friends call me a Catholic Muslim. But I studied Christianity. And I had some Christian friends in school. I still have them as friends. And they were always wondering about two verses in the Bible that they see them contradicting. The first one in the Old Testament. Some people like to call it in the Christian theology the Mosaic law, of the law of Moses, which is an eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth. The second one in the New Testament, usually it's called the concept of forgiveness of Jesus Christ, which is turn the left cheek to the one who slapped you on the right cheek. And they always said, which one should we apply as Christians today? An eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth? Or turn the left cheek to the one who slapped me on my right cheek? And the answer was always, the New Testament is the one we apply. It's new. It's abrogating the old. Yes, we should apply, turn the left cheek to the one who slapped your right cheek. That's an answer that I always heard. And I always wondered, is this really true? Until I read the Quran. And I found the answer in the Quran. That both concepts are not contradicting. God said in the Quran, and indeed whosoever takes revenge after he has suffered wrong, against such there is no blame. Which means that no one can blame someone who decides to apply an eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth as long as he is oppressed. On who is the blame then? The second verse says, the blame is only against those who oppress men with wrongdoing and insolently transgress beyond bounds in the land, which means that the blame is on the oppressor. The third verse says, and whosoever shows patience and forgiveness, that would truly be recommended by Allah. Which means that Allah is allowing you, when you are oppressed, to apply an eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth. But He would love to see you showing forgiveness and tolerance and patience. Which means Allah would love to see you turning the left cheek. But He's not forcing you to do it. You cannot base the law in a country on the concept of forgiveness. You cannot make the law in this country like that. If you slap someone on his right cheek and he doesn't turn the left cheek, call the police. You cannot. So the law has to be based on an eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth. But according to the Islamic Sharia, the law has to give a space for forgiveness. If the one who is oppressed decides to forgive, he should be allowed to forgive. An eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth. What's recommended is turn the left cheek. But you're not forced. In one hand, you don't have two similar fingers. Why do you think that Allah will treat us all like people who are similar to each other? We're not similar. We're not robots that are programmed. Some of us can forgive and some cannot. And some of us who can forgive, they may not be able to forgive sometimes when the wound is too deep. Allah is recommending, is encouraging you to show forgiveness, but He's not forcing you. Does Islam recommend fighting at any time? Yes. Before saying when, let me first discuss with you the difference between violence and terrorism. What's the difference between violence and terrorism? Can we say that violence is what two enemies do directly against each other? While terrorism is violence, but not against the enemy. Terrorism is violence against the weak. Terrorism is violence against the weak to put pressure on the enemy indirectly. Those who killed 3,000 people in the towers of New York, they didn't really have a problem with them. They were putting pressure on their enemy indirectly. So terrorism is violence, but not directly against the enemy. It's against weak people. Those who killed 500,000 in Hiroshima and Nagasaki did not really have a problem with them. But they wanted to use them to put pressure on their enemy, which is the Japanese government, indirectly. So do you agree with me that terrorism is a subset of violence? Terrorism is violence against the weak. Look at this verse. The Quran says, blaming Muslims if they don't fight in this case. And what is wrong with you that you fight not against the weak, that you fight not in the cause of Allah for those weak, ill-treated and oppressed among men, women and children? What did we say the weak are suffering from? Terrorism. So here God is blaming Muslims when they don't fight terrorism. So the word jihad means war on terrorism, not terrorism. That's why Muslims love the word jihad, because it means war on terrorism, but I mean the real war on terrorism, not war for oil and claiming to be war on terrorism. Can we say with all this that Islam is a religion of peace? After all these combat orders, yes, of course, Islam is a religion of peace.